Alright guys, welcome back to my 2024 Acura Integra Type S. We've just crossed 730 miles. This has been my daily driver for the past 4 or 5 weeks, and I want to share some of the things that I like and dislike about this car so far. Focusing primarily on a daily driving use case. How does this car fare as a daily, and is it worth its $51,000 MSRP? Once I track this car at Sonoma Raceway in a few weeks, I'll give my full impressions of how this car drives and performs at the limit. But let's talk about some of the more practical aspects of this car. After all, it's not a hardcore dedicated sports car. It's based on the Honda Civic. So in everyday conditions, how does this car fare? So let's get into the 5 things I really like about the Integra Type S. Number 1 being the interior. Despite what so many people have been saying about this car being an overpriced Honda Civic, I've said this before and I'll say it again, reserve judgment until you've actually sat in one. You don't even have to drive it per se, just sit in one and just soak in the interior, the build quality, the materials, even just the way it visually looks, the overall design language of this interior. It feels every bit of $51,000 in my opinion. I even compared this car to the more expensive Cadillac CT4V Blackwing. That car is about $10,000, maybe $15,000 more once you add some options. But from an interior design standpoint, I actually like the Integra Type S better in certain ways. Everything about it just looks classy. I love this crisscross design to the air vents. This material across the dash feels really nice. It has a textured surface. The steering wheel has perforated leather and it feels excellent to the touch. It's not too thick in terms of the rim, it's just right. The buttons all feel relatively high quality. I love these textured knobs for the HVAC controls. They feel really nice. Obviously the seats are leather and Alcantara and feel very high quality. Even the screen is large, easy to read, with a very responsive touch screen, while still maintaining physical buttons here for home, back, your volume knob, as well as your track seeking. If I did have some complaints with the interior, it would be slightly excessive use of piano black plastic, as you can see right here in the center console. Lots of easily scratched or fingerprint smudging piano black, and on the steering wheel as well, on these 9 and 3 spokes. I don't know why they would put piano black here. Seems like a very odd design choice. It does look nice, I guess, when it's clean, but that's just it. It's never going to be clean. I wish we were driving this at night so I could show you the ambient lighting that we have on the doors here. Only the front doors have it. And it's not just the interior quality and design language that I like. I also love the fact that this is a very spacious vehicle. Being based on the latest generation Honda Civic means it's very practical. It's far more spacious and comfortable than the Toyota Corolla. The rear seat has plenty of legroom. It's comfortable for 4 adults, and I'll get back to that number in a second. And the hatch is pretty enormous. You can fit multiple full-size luggages in there, no problem. There's also plenty of in-cabin storage in the front. We have these fairly large door bins for your water bottles and knickknacks. There's this space here for your phone with a wireless charger. 2 cup holders down here. So overall, the interior gets a solid thumbs up from me. I think it feels, again, every bit of $51,000. Now, coming to the second thing I love about my Type S, that's the suspension. For daily driving, this car is supremely comfortable. Since we do have adaptive dampers, we have 3 different settings for the suspension: Comfort, Sport, and Sport Plus. And there's a very, very noticeable difference between the 3. In comfort mode, I have 0 complaints with how this car rides. It soaks up the bumps just so effectively, while still feeling good. It doesn't give you too much body roll. It still feels very planted. You can take corners at pretty high speed. On-ramps are an absolute joy in this car, even in comfort mode. And that's one big advantage this has over the FL5 Honda Civic Type R, and that's all down to software suspension tuning. The hardware, the springs and dampers between the 2 cars are actually the same part. But there's an electronic active damper module on this car that is different than the one on the Civic Type R. And if you take the one from a Type S and install it into a Type R, you get identical ride quality. And again, I think that's a huge advantage for the Type S, because in Sport Plus mode, as I found on a canyon road, this car is plenty stiff. It gives you lots of control, virtually no body roll, while still soaking up the bumps. I really think the suspension of this car is one of the big highlights for me. It makes the car feel so premium and so versatile at the same time. And it absolutely crushes the GR Corolla in that respect. The third thing I love about the Type S is the tech. Let me demonstrate some of the driver aids that this car offers. We can use this dial on the gauge cluster. We've got things like road departure mitigation, blind spot information system, low speed braking control, parking sensors, collision mitigation braking system. I have all of those enabled for daily driving. They all work brilliantly. And we have radar cruise control with a heads-up display. So if I turn the system on, I set it to, let's say, 65 miles an hour, which is the speed limit. I can set the distance that I want the car to follow the car in front of me. And even with the manual transmission, even if you shift gears, it'll keep the radar cruise control on. So right now, I am not even touching the accelerator, and as long as I keep my hands on the steering wheel with a bit of pressure, it will keep me in my lane as well. Automatic braking, kicking in there. When your speed does fall below a certain threshold, it will cancel the cruise control, but it's easy enough to just get back up to speed, press resume, and you're back on your way. This is my first car where I've had wireless Android Auto and CarPlay, and it works fantastically. It connects to the car right when I turn it on, and as you can see here, it's very, very responsive. We also have a wireless phone charger. Up here we have a USB Type-C as well as a Type-A port. And last but not least, in terms of tech, one thing this has over the Type R is the ELS Studio 3D sound system. It is fantastic. 16 speaker system. Nice Ferrari here. Plenty of bass, very clean, crisp, punchy. The mids and highs are well up to standard, at least for my not ultra discerning ear, I would admit, but I've driven plenty of cars and this is definitely one of the better sound systems I've experienced. And all of these things might sound fairly standard nowadays for a $50,000+ car, but I think what makes the tech in this car a little bit unique or special is that you can get all of these things in a driver-focused car with a manual transmission. This is a lightweight 3,200-ish pound car that still offers all of the creature comforts you would expect of a $50,000 non-performance car. So moving on to the fifth and final thing I love about the Type S is the driver inputs. For daily driving, this car is so easy to get around in. And outside of the suspension, the nice interior, and the tech, that mostly comes down to the driver inputs. The steering, throttle response, the shifter, the clutch, the brakes, everything feels linear with a light touch, very easy and low effort to operate when you're in the softest drive modes. In comfort, the steering is nice and light while still being direct. There's very little play off center. The shifter is typical Honda. It is absolutely fantastic. I would say it's 80 to 90% as enjoyable to use as my favorite transmission, the S2000 manual, but it has a more solid and lighter touch to it. It's lower effort and you're less likely to miss shift. But most importantly is the clutch and throttle response. Compared to my 2022 Subaru BRZ, this is so much easier to drive smoothly, especially from a stop. The clutch is light, but you can very precisely feel where the engagement point is, and the throttle response is very well matched to that clutch feel. Unlike the BRZ, which has quite a bit of rev hang and a fairly vague engagement point with the clutch, this just feels super easy. I haven't stalled this car even once. And so all of those things just make this car a pleasure to drive on a daily basis and very, very low effort. So what are the things I don't like? Number one, and this is actually my biggest gripe with this car, is the seats. I wasn't expecting to say this, but I really am not a fan of these seats in the Type S. They're a huge downgrade from the Civic Type R seats in my opinion. And I'm not just talking about the fact that they don't have a ton of side bolstering and support for hard driving, which is true by the way. These don't hold me in very well at all, even in the canyons. We'll see how they fare on track. I have very low expectations. But even for daily driving, I get it. They wanted to move to a more upscale seat for the Acura product as compared to the Honda. We have Alcantara and leather, and the materials feel really, really nice. I have no problems with it at all. But the actual shape of the seat itself, for some reason, I can't get it quite perfectly comfortable for long trips. There is adjustable lumbar, at least for the driver's seat, but again, it's just not quite perfect. I do get some mild lower back discomfort. And my other gripe with these seats is the fact that the driver's seat is power adjustable, which is not there in the Civic Type R, but the front passenger seat is still manual. And there's no memory seat function for this driver's seat, and there's no cooled seats. We do get heated seats, but at least here in California, I'd be much happier with cooled or ventilated seats. So without those features, I frankly don't find much value in the fact that the driver's seat is power adjustable. I'd rather it just be the manual, far more supportive and comfortable seat from the Civic Type R. And that's not where it ends. Even in the back, look at that, the middle seat is non-existent. For some reason, Acura decided to put some permanent cup holders where that middle seat otherwise would be, and there's not even a seatbelt there. If any of you know why Acura made this design choice, please let me know, because I can't figure it out. So it is a 4-seat vehicle. Not a huge deal if you don't have a family, but if you do, and your family size happens to be 5, then this might be a deal breaker for you. Now, the next two things I don't like about the Type S are more performance oriented. So number 2 is the fact that you have to do a pedal dance in order to fully turn off traction and stability control. There is a button here for traction, and if you hold it, you'll see the traction off light illuminated, but it's not fully off. In order to turn it fully off, you have to turn the car off, and it's like this 10 or 12 step process, which I just haven't been bothered to learn yet because I haven't driven the car on track. In the canyons with just traction off, I think the car doesn't intervene all that much and it feels perfectly fine. In the Civic Type R, you can just hold the button as far as I'm aware, and the systems will turn completely off. Kind of a minor pet peeve, but a pet peeve nonetheless, since I do plan to take this thing out on the racetrack. And you can imagine in a 5-session track day, I'll have to do that complicated pedal dance 5 times. The third thing I don't like about the Type S is the fact that there's no oil temp gauge. Again, this is something that the Civic Type R, its mechanically identical cousin, has. In fact, the Civic Type R gives you the full Honda Log R system, which you can use to show you all sorts of data in real time about the car, including your oil and water temps, which are very, very critical for this car because, as many of you might know by now, these engines, these K20C1 power plants, have a tendency to overheat. Even though Honda has improved the cooling of the FL5 Type R over the previous generation FK8, the new Type R does overheat quite badly on hot days. And once the oil temp reaches 300 degrees Fahrenheit, the entire Log R system freezes and doesn't show any temps above that point. But all of that is a moot point for the Type S because we don't even get Log R and we don't even get any sort of oil temp gauge. So I'm going to be looking into some aftermarket fixes or solutions. I know there is a way to mirror your Android phone screen on the display here. At least I've seen that done in an ND1 Miata, because then I can potentially just use an app on my phone to pull the oil temp from OBD2 and display that on the screen. Hopefully I can get that to work. If any of you have suggestions or have tried it before, please let me know. That's not an issue for daily driving. You're not going to overheat this car unless you're really pushing it to the limit on a racetrack on a hot day. But still something that I'm already not looking forward to dealing with. For a $50,000+ performance car like this that has all the mechanical bits to go fast on track, it should just have an oil temp gauge. Even my $32,000 Subaru BRZ has that. Now, the fourth and final thing I don't like about my Type S so far, and this might come as a surprise to some of you, I've said before that I think this car is worth the money, and I still think that's true, but I won't deny the fact that this car competes in a price range or a price category that is typically associated with rear-wheel drive cars. And so that's the trade-off you have to be willing to make if you buy a Type S at MSRP, or I guess above, which I don't think you should do, by the way. A Type S identical to mine, same color, with only 500 miles, only got up to $49.5 thousand yesterday on Cars and Bids, and it didn't sell, even at $2,000 to $3,000 below MSRP. So buying one of these with markup just doesn't make any sense to me. I know, easier said than done to find one of these at MSRP, but I know it can be done because I did it. But anyway, back to my point, this car does compete with a lot of rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive vehicles in price. It gets within spitting distance of the Cadillac CT4V Blackwing, the BMW M2 with essentially no options, and cars like the Audi RS3, the Mercedes CLA 45, and those cars all offer more performance for not that much more money. That being said, again, I think this car, if you look at all of the things it offers as an overall package, not just purely a performance-focused vehicle, I still think it's very much worth its asking price. Because it offers such a great blend of daily drivability, practicality, comfort, tech, and reliability, plus the fun-to-drive dynamics, best-in-class shifter feel, and still really solid performance, I can't think of another brand new car for $51,000 to $52,000 that can do everything this car does. I think it's worth every penny over the GR Corolla because this is better in every single way except all-weather capability, since the GR Corolla is all-wheel drive. So those are my thoughts after living with the Type S for 743 miles. If you own a Type S or have at least driven one, what other quirks have you noticed with this car? Good or bad? Am I missing anything? Are there other things that might be deal breakers to potential buyers? Can't wait to take this thing on track in about 3 weeks. I'll be tracking it in bone stock condition, except for upgraded .4 brake fluid. Can't wait to see what kind of lap times this thing can put down. But for now, I'm really enjoying this car as a daily driver and a canyon carver. So stay tuned for more content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.